Good morning, everyone. How you doing today? Almost to the end, guys. We are almost to the end of the free agency primers. We are almost at the point where we can actually start seeing what this team is going to do rather than just talking about it. Just a handful of days away from free agency opening up. Gonna be fun, gonna be exciting. But just because we're near the end doesn't mean that the stuff we have left to talk about isn't that interesting. And what we're going to talk about today is one of the most important things with this team this offseason if we really are going to do what Clint Hurt insinuated on his initial press conference. Outside linebacker. If we are going to do a hybrid, if we're going to do 3-4 stuff, if we're going to be trying to confuse other teams, we need to be good at outside linebacker. Because what you do with your outside linebackers in a 3-4 is very different from what you do with an outside linebacker in a 4-3 or what you do with a defensive end in a 4-3. Not everybody can make that transition. So I can tell you right now, you need to get the right personnel in to make this work, or else you're going to end up with a outside linebacker who doesn't know how to play standing up, doesn't know how to play without his hand in the dirt, doesn't know how to drop into space, doesn't know how to cover, and it doesn't go well. So this positional need may end up being the most expensive acquisition we make this offseason. If we're really going to do this, we need to get the right guy, and the right guys tend to cost a lot of money. So looking at the team right now, I have some good news when it comes to this position from a 3-4 perspective. Darrell Taylor, I think, is made for this. I think Darrell Taylor is made for a hybrid defense because looking at him, looking at his skill set, looking at what he's done so far, looking at what he did in college, I think he can do it all. So a hybrid defense is great for him. I think he can play defensive end in a 4-3, both sides, Leo and 5-tech. I think he can play Sam linebacker in a 4-3, and I think he can play 3-4 outside linebacker. I think he can do all that stuff. So one of the reasons why I really like this transition that we're making on defense is that the benefits for Darrell Taylor should be massive. We should see better things and more valuable things out of Darrell Taylor here. However, Carlos Dunlap, I don't think he can play outside linebacker in a 3-4. Alton Robinson, same thing. And any like 5-tech we had last year, that's a hell no. Rasheem Green, LJ Collier, Kerry Hyder, no. So we need help there. Now I'll say this. If we keep Benson Mayowa, I think he can be a quality backup outside linebacker. I think he can do that. I think he has enough wherewithal in coverage, dropping back into space, to hold down the fort at outside linebacker. But he should not really be starting. And he shouldn't be playing that much. He should be a backup, 100%. So here's the thing. If we're going to actually do this, we need to bring in another stud. Okay, we don't need to bring in another warm body. We need to bring in another guy who can knock the doors down. And you probably need another guy for depth. Now, that's somewhat easier to take care of, but nevertheless, what I'm trying to get at here is this is going to cost some money. This is going to be one of the biggest investments we make this offseason. So there are a few big names that everyone's buzzing about right now. I'll talk about them, but there are a couple of guys that are being slept on a little bit, I think, who we could definitely bring in as at least depth. But just be prepared to open up your checkbook for this one. Okay, so the first guy is Von Miller. He's the first guy on this list, coming off a monster contract he signed with the Broncos, and he just finished up his season with the Rams, helped them win a Super Bowl, is coming off a pretty successful season. He ended up having 9.5 sacks in 15 games. Came on strong for the Rams. At the end, he made some plays in the playoffs that helped them get their way through. I was impressed with what Von Miller did, given the fact that he missed all of 2020 and that he was 32 years old. So age is starting to become a concern. But as of right now, he's doing the stuff, right? Like, this is a guy who's made a lot of Pro Bowls. He made the All-Decade team. He's made All-Pro teams. future Hall of Famer. He's probably going to end up with over 130 career sacks. He's one of the best players of this era. And I think that, excuse me, Von Miller, bringing him in across from Darrell Taylor as the other starting outside linebacker, is a viable strategy. And you know he knows how to do this outside linebacker thing because that's what he did constantly in Denver pretty much. So PFF is also very high on Von Miller. They gave him a grade of almost 89 for his 2021 season. Going back to the last time he played, 2019, he had a very good grade. So PFF is still very high on him. So let's talk money here. Excuse me. Over 90 in 2018, by the way. Spotrac says 2 years, 21.2. That's not bad. That's not bad. It's not so long term that he's guaranteed to fall off a cliff before the contract is up. However, he is about to turn 33. It is still 8 figures a year, so it's a little dicey. That being said, I would put Von Miller near the top of the list if we really are going to do this 3-4 thing. Okay, let's talk about the next big name on this list, and that would be Chandler Jones, who is a year younger than Von Miller, but nevertheless, I have to throw up some serious warning flags when it comes to the Chandler Jones stuff. So this is a guy who's going to have a lot of gas behind him as a guy Seattle should get this offseason if they're going to do the 3-4. He's had a great career as a 3-4 outside linebacker. He had double-digit sacks last year, and he's somebody who I wondered if Seattle should consider bringing in last year if he was a salary cap cut from the Cardinals. So let's dive in a little bit. Now, not taking anything away from Chandler Jones. He's had a great career. He's been a great player. He was great in New England, helped them win a Super Bowl, and then he went to Arizona and has continued to be one of the best defensive players in the league. Made all-pro teams. In 2019, I think he was runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year. And we know that he can get things done as a 3-4 outside linebacker because that's what he's been doing for years in Arizona. He's had all-pro years in Arizona as a 3-4 linebacker. Now, here's the thing. Okay, so 2020, much like Von Miller, Chandler Jones didn't really do that much in 2020. He played in 5 games. Von Miller didn't play in any, but neither guy was very productive. Now, in 2021, Chandler Jones came back and played fine. He missed a couple games, but he had 10.5 sacks. That sounds pretty good, right? He made the Pro Bowl. Ooh, okay, that's good. Okay, but I got to point out here, and I understand that sacks come in bunches. Chandler Jones had 5 sacks in Game 1. He had 2 sacks against the Seahawks when we played them in Seattle. And then, other than that, across the 13 other games he played, he had like 3.5 sacks. So this should be a Claxton sounding off in your head about this Chandler Jones dude. Okay, he's good. He's still good. He's a year younger than Von Miller, but not everybody ages the same way. Maybe we're looking at Chandler Jones about to hit a little bit of a cliff. I'm just seeing some more warning signs with him than I am Von Miller. His PFF grade is still strong, 72, but not close to really what Von Miller gave you. In 2019, the year he almost won Defensive Player of the Year, it was 86, so you can see the drop-off. And here's the kicker for me. Chandler Jones, if Spotrac is correct, which is there's no guarantee of, is going to command more money and a longer-term contract because he's a year younger. People are going to be looking at Chandler Jones and kind of evaluating him through a different lens because of that extra year younger that he is. Spotrac says 3 years, $44 million. I don't know if I like that. So Chandler Jones is on the list, but I'm a little wary of that. And I think we should be very careful. He strikes me as more of an age concern than Von Miller. But I'll say this, both guys you have to be wary of. And for that reason, I actually favor this third guy over both of those. I'm talking about Hassan Reddick, also on this list. He's going to turn 28, I think, before the season starts. So actually, he'll turn 28 a couple weeks into the season. And this is a guy who has tremendous draft pedigree. He was a first-round pick by Arizona in 2017. And he's had 2 really good years now under the radar as an outside linebacker. Excuse me. In 2020, he played in 16 games for the Cardinals. He had 12 and a half sacks. He was, I mean, when Chandler Jones went down, had a desperate need for pass rush at outside linebacker, and Hassan Reddick was one of the main guys who really stepped up for them. And in the final year of his rookie contract, he finally showed that first round pedigree that they had drafted him for. And then in the offseason, people didn't believe him because it was a contract year. So he went to Carolina for like $6 million, which is a steal for a pass rusher. And he had 11 sacks. And I understand in both those years he's playing for a new contract. But look, if these players were perfect, if these players were beyond reproach, they probably wouldn't hit free agency. If Hassan Reddick was dominating the way Von Miller dominated as a player on a rookie contract 10 years ago, then he probably would have been re-signed by Arizona and we'd never have a chance to get him. So weighing the potential risks and rewards of getting these guys, I would rather bet on Hassan Reddick in his prime over older players who may genuinely be approaching the cliff. So I like Hassan Reddick a lot. He has some experience also playing in coverage, playing in space. These are things that are important. PFF likes him well enough. They gave him a 68 grade for 2021, 73 for 2020, which was really solid. And those were really the 2 years he's put up big numbers. So to me, Hassan Reddick should be the number one blue chipper you get at outside linebacker 3-4. Now, Spotrac thinks he's going to be pricey. 5 years, 76.8. I think you could get him for 4 years, $60 million. So basically a $15 million a year deal for 4 years. I think that's pretty reasonable. And I think he'll probably be worth that. It's not going to be fun paying a guy that much money, but pass rushers are not cheap. And this is a guy coming into his prime. Who knows? He could get better. So to me, you kind of have to get one of those three guys unless you want to go get Jadeveon Clowney. And I already talked about Clowney in my 4-3 defensive end video, so I'm not really going to go into the details on Clowney. But Jadeveon Clowney would be great for this hybrid defense, I think. He might be my number one overall guy because I think you could get him for like $10 million, $11 million a year, probably cheaper than these guys, maybe about the same as Von Miller because of Von's age. But Clowney is a guy who can play defensive end in a 4-3. He can play 5-tech, Leo. He can do 3-4 outside linebacker. And I think he can be a very positive influence on this defense at all of those positions. So, in my opinion, if you're really going to try this hybrid defense, you have to get Von Miller, Chandler Jones, Hassan Reddick, or Jadeveon Clowney. And I already covered the positives about Clowney in my defensive end video, so I'm just going to briefly mention him here. But Clowney might be the guy because he's such a good fit for a hybrid defense. Okay, before we end this video, I want to talk about some guys who might be good depth, right? Because you got Taylor, you've got X on the other side starting, and then you've got Benson Mayowa coming off the bench. But you need somebody else coming off the bench because these guys are going to be rotating in and out. There are two names that catch my attention in this free agency pool as of right now. The first guy is another Cardinal, Dennis Gardeck. He was undrafted from Sioux Falls, not a high-profile player at all. He didn't really do anything in 2021, but he's played the 3-4 outside linebacker before, and in 2020, in very limited snaps, he had 7 sacks. He was another guy who they needed to fill in when Chandler Jones ended up not really doing anything that year. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, could the lack of production in 2021 be related to the fact that Chandler Jones came back and sucked up a lot of the snaps? Was 2020 a fluke? Was 2021 the fluke? I don't know. I feel like there's something here with Dennis Gardeck. You don't get 7 sacks in. Let me check here real quick. How many snaps was it? It was 94 snaps. Something tells me that there's something to that. So I would take a look at him as a backup. PFF still thinks he played fairly well in 2021, by the way, for whatever that's worth. Very limited time he saw. But they gave him a grade of almost 90 for 2020. So he's doing something right. Arizona's probably not going to be able to keep him. So probably going to shake free. He might be a good guy to come off the bench for you as your 3-4 outside guy. So that would be one of the chief guys that I really take a look at as a backup pass rusher in this new defense. And the last guy that I would take a look at here would be Malik Reed, linebacker from the Broncos. Another guy who has experience rushing from the 3-4 outside spot. He's young. He's, what is he, 25, going to turn 26 this offseason. He had 8 sacks in 2020, and a lot of it helping replace Von Miller. And then 2021, Von Miller was back for half the season, and he still got 5 sacks. Again, has experience as the outside linebacker. So this might be a credible guy to bring in off the bench. He's done fairly well in relatively limited snaps for Denver the last 2 years now. PFF is not a huge fan of his 2021. They gave him a 56. 2020 was a little bit better, 64. So it's not great, but it's good enough for somebody coming off the bench. Malik Reed's probably going to be better at this than Benson Mayo will be. Dennis Gardeck will probably be better at this role than Benson Mayo will be. So you might have a situation where you've got your 2 starters, and then Gardeck or Reed is the first rusher off the bench. Mayo is the second rusher off the bench. And then maybe you get, I don't know, maybe you've got a guy hanging around on the practice squad who can do outside linebacker stuff. That's really about it. There are some other notable names here, but those are the guys who really caught my eye for this role. But as much as I don't want to spend big on defense this offseason, if you're going to pull this off, I think you have to. At minimum, I think you're dropping $10 million a year on Von Miller or Clowney, and you might have to go $15 million a year for Reddick. And that's not great. That's not what I was planning for, but it's totally doable. So I think that Reddick and Clowney need to be near the top of the list for free agency signings this offseason at this point. And I think if we do bring in one of those guys, this 3-4 defense has a great chance. We'll obviously talk about some of the rookies we can get, but drafting a rookie and expecting him to be a stud starting outside linebacker in a 3-4, dangerous game. Even the really good ones typically don't immediately blow up. Like, it's pretty rare you find a rookie who gets double-digit sacks. And if they do, they usually have weaknesses in other areas of their game. So I need a veteran here. Hassan Reddick, Jadeveon Clowney, maybe Von Miller. Those would be my guys. Bring in some depth as well. We need to fix this pass rush. I think switching to the 3-4 is a good idea to take that first step, but there needs to be another step after it. We need the right guys to run this scheme. All right, let me know what you guys think down below. See you guys later. Go Hawks. It's almost here, guys. Almost here.